Are you ready to like really get into it today? We're talking Apple,
Oh, yeah.
but
Always ready for Apple.
not just like the iPhones and the new releases and all that. We're going way deeper,
Way
like
deeper.
into some like geopolitical stuff,
Mm-hmm.
global power plays, maybe even like a little bit of that too big to fail drama.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, we're looking at Apple's upcoming earnings report, but like through a totally different lens.
Yeah.
We're not just going to be talking about iPhones and profits.
Right.
We're going to be talking about how deeply Apple is woven into the fabric of like US-China relations,
Yeah.
a vulnerability that's been building for decades.
It's kind of wild, right? Like most of us, I think we just see our iPhones.
Yeah.
Maybe we check our Apple stock every once in a while, but we don't think about all this like high-stakes stuff
Right.
that's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, did you know that 70% of iPhones are made in China?
It's a crazy number.
That's huge.
Yeah, 70%.
Especially like with everything that's going on between the US and China right now.
Yeah, and it's not just about manufacturing, right? I mean, Apple has cultivated a deep dependence on China with, a massive workforce, over 5 million people there,
Wow.
and billions of dollars flowing in from the Chinese market. I mean, for a long time, this was seen as like a strategic masterstroke
Right.
orchestrated by Tim Cook, but now, it's starting to look like a potential powder keg.
Okay. So let's break this down a little bit. So we're talking about like Apple's China dilemma.
Yes.
How their dependence, which was once like their strength, is now maybe becoming a risk.
Right.
What does that mean for like us as consumers, and like what does that mean for the future of Apple?
Well, first, let's be clear about like the scale of this dependence.
Yeah.
It's not just about those iPhones. I mean, Apple has poured resources into building up China's tech infrastructure, like, making it incredibly difficult to just like
Yeah.
shift production elsewhere.
Like pick up and move.
Yeah. Imagine trying to move a whole ecosystem, not just like factories, right?
Right.
It's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, and I bet that logistical nightmare like translates into like real world consequences for us.
Oh, absolutely.
So are we talking like higher prices for iPhones?
Yeah.
Like supply chain issues that could delay the new releases?
All of that. And don't forget about like the impact on Apple stock.
Oh yeah,
Investors are watching this very closely.
for sure.
And any sign of instability could send shockwaves through the market.
Yeah.
So yeah, this isn't just some abstract geopolitical game.
Right.
This directly affects your wallet, your gadgets, and potentially even your investments.
Okay, so China is a big part of the story, but then there's Taiwan.
Yes.
And you mentioned that it plays like a crucial role, especially when it comes to those like super high-tech chips that are in everything these days.
Well, Taiwan's home to TSMC, which is like, the crown jewel of chip making.
Okay.
They produce the most advanced microchips in the world.
Wow.
The brains behind not just iPhones, but like cutting-edge AI development.
Right.
The catch is China claims Taiwan as its own and has not ruled out using force to reunify the island.
So we've got this tiny island that's essential to the global tech industry
Yeah,
with like a geopolitical target on its back.
right.
And that just adds like another layer of risk to Apple's already complicated situation.
Imagine a scenario where there's like a conflict over Taiwan.
Oh, wow.
Right. TSMC's chip production gets disrupted, and suddenly everything from iPhone manufacturing to the advancement of AI just grinds to a halt.
That would be massive.
That's what's at stake here, right? It's not just Apple's problem, it's a global problem.
And all of this is happening as this like America First movement is gaining momentum.
Right.
And they're really pushing for companies like Apple to bring manufacturing back to the U.S.
Right. And figures like J.D. Vance have been particularly vocal about this,
Yeah.
criticizing Apple for relying on foreign labor.
Right.
They argue that it undermines American jobs and economic interests.
So Apple is kind of caught between a rock and hard place here.
They-
If they stay like heavily reliant on China, they risk political backlash and potential disruption
Yeah.
in a really volatile region.
Yeah.
But shifting production away from China is like,
Oh, it's a massive undertaking
yeah,
with no guarantees of success.
it's almost like they're damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Exactly. And at the center of this storm is Tim Cook.
Yeah.
He's the architect of Apple's China strategy.
Yeah.
The one who built this incredibly efficient but now potentially very vulnerable system.
He's got to be feeling the pressure.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's been hailed as like this visionary,
Yeah.
a master of supply chains.
Right.
But this situation is really putting his leadership to the
Oh,
test.
for sure. I mean, Cook's a fascinating figure in all of this. I mean,
Yeah.
he's known for being incredibly strategic, meticulous, and even secretive,
Yeah.
but his success has been built on this deep understanding of global supply chains.
Right.
And China has been a core part of that equation for decades.
Yeah.
So the question now is, can he adapt? Can he pivot? Can he find a way out of this maze he's essentially built himself, you know?
So,
Makes you wonder how he even got here, right? Like, how did Apple even get so intertwined with China in the first place?
yeah, I was reading that Tim Cook, he actually took like a bunch of trips to China back in the 90s before he was even CEO.
Yeah.
Like he saw the potential there, the huge workforce, all the
Yeah.
manufacturing capability.
You know, it's interesting. Cook wasn't just looking for cheap labor.
Right.
I mean, he wanted to build a system that was fast, efficient, and could adapt to the rapidly changing,
Yeah.
demands of the tech world.
Right.
I mean, he recognized that technology, quote unquote, spoils fast.
Right. Yeah.
So he needed a supply chain that could keep up.
So he basically helped to create the manufacturing powerhouse that China is today.
Right.
I mean,
In a lot of ways, yes.
they didn't have that kind of infrastructure back then, did they?
Not at the scale Apple needed. Cook invested heavily in building relationships with Chinese suppliers, training workers, setting up the entire ecosystem.
Wow.
I mean, it was a gamble for sure, but it paid off big time.
Yeah, until now it seems.
Right.
Now those very strengths are looking more like weaknesses as geopolitical tensions rise.
Exactly. And let's not forget that China isn't just a passive player in this. I mean, they have their own interests to protect millions of jobs tied to Apple's success.
Wow.
And, a growing sense of national pride when it comes to technology.
Right, it's totally a two-way street.
Yeah.
Apple needs China for the manufacturing and to have access to that massive market.
Absolutely.
But China also benefits enormously from Apple being there.
Oh, yeah. It's a very complicated dance.
Yeah,
And it's getting harder and harder to maintain the balance.
for sure. So that's where diversification comes in.
Yeah.
We touched on it a little bit before, but let's dive in a little deeper.
Yeah.
So Apple's been investing in India, setting up factories there, trying to ramp up production. Why India, though? I mean, other countries have cheap labor, too. What makes India so attractive?
Well, it's more than just cheap labor.
Okay.
India has a huge and young workforce that's hungry for opportunities.
Right.
And it's also got a rapidly growing middle class that's eager to buy the latest gadgets.
Oh, so they're looking at them as like a manufacturing hub and a massive new market.
Exactly.
They're like killing two birds with one stone.
Precisely. And the Indian government is actively courting foreign investment,
Yeah.
trying to make it easier for companies like Apple to, do business there.
Right. Okay. So India's got potential, but can they really compete with China when it comes to like scale and efficiency?
It's a challenge for sure.
Right. Because China's been doing this for decades.
Yeah, China has that well-established infrastructure, a highly skilled workforce, and a government that's been very supportive
Right.
of the tech industry.
Yeah.
India is still catching up, but they're making progress.
It sounds like a long game for Apple.
It is, and it's not without risks. I mean, India has its own set of challenges, bureaucracy, infrastructure gaps,
Yeah.
and sometimes inconsistent policies, but the potential rewards are huge.
So it's like Apple's placing another bet, hoping that India will be like the next China, so to speak.
Right.
But what about other options? Are there any other countries that could like step in and play the role that China's played for so long?
Well, I mean, Apple is exploring other avenues as well.
Okay.
I mean, they've been investing in Vietnam, for example, and there's talk of expanding operations in Thailand and even Mexico.
So it's a multi-pronged approach, kind of like don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
Spread the risk and hope for the best.
Precisely. And it's not just about geography.
Right.
I mean, Apple is also trying to bring some manufacturing back to the U.S.
Oh, yeah, we were talking about that America First pressure.
Yeah.
Is that what's driving that move?
Partly, but it's also about optics.
Okay.
Apple wants to show that it's committed to American jobs and the American economy. It's a way to, appease politicians and maybe gain some goodwill from consumers.
But isn't it way more expensive to manufacture in the U.S.? I mean, labor costs alone are like significantly higher.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
And that's why Apple's being very selective about what they bring back.
Both.
They're focusing on high-end products like the Mac Pro, where the margins are higher and the labor component is relatively small.
So it's more of like a symbolic gesture than a major shift in strategy.
For now, yes, but it's a sign that Apple is,
Yeah.
trying to play both sides to balance its global ambitions with the, political realities of its home country.
Right. Okay. So we've got China, we've got India, We've got a sprinkle of other countries and like a dash of American manufacturing.
It's a complicated recipe.
It is a very complicated recipe.
And the ingredients are constantly changing.
Right.
This is a very dynamic situation, and Apple has to be nimble and adaptable to survive.
It all makes me wonder what role, if any, we as consumers can play in this whole thing. I mean, it feels like we're just along for the ride.
That's a great question, and it's one that deserves a deeper discussion.
Yeah.
Let's explore that in more detail after we take a moment to reflect on what we've covered so far.
So we talked about Apple's deep ties with China and the potential risks and their efforts to diversify with places like India, but where do we fit in all this?
Yeah.
It feels like this big chess game is happening way above our heads.
It's easy to feel that way, right? Like we're just pawns in this geopolitical game. But
Yeah.
here's the thing. Our choices as consumers actually do matter.
Okay, I'm listening. What can we actually do to influence this situation? It feels kind of like David versus Goliath.
You're right. It's not about single-handedly shifting global supply chains. But awareness is a powerful first step.
Right.
Understanding where your products come from, the conditions they're made under, the geopolitical factors at play,
Yeah.
that can inform your purchasing decisions.
So do our research, basically, not just grab the latest gadget without thinking about the bigger picture.
Exactly. Look for companies that prioritize things like ethical sourcing, sustainable practices, and diversification of their supply chains.
So it's like voting with our wallets,
Yes, exactly.
choosing to support companies that align with our values.
Precisely. And don't underestimate the power of conversation.
Oh, right.
Talk to your friends, family, colleagues about these issues.
Yeah.
Raising awareness and sparking broader discussions about the role of technology in our lives can have a ripple effect.
So it's a combination of things then,
'Kay.
like informed consumerism, thoughtful conversations, maybe even a bit of activism, right?
You could say that it's about recognizing that our choices, both big and small, have consequences,
Right.
and that we have a collective responsibility to shape the future of technology in a way that benefits everyone, not just a few powerful corporations.
Speaking of powerful corporations in the future of technology, we can't ignore like the elephant in the room here.
Yeah,
The race for AI dominance. It's like the space race of the 21st century.
absolutely. And it's not just about economic competitiveness. It's about national security and global influence. I mean, whoever controls AI will have a significant advantage in shaping the world of
Oh.
tomorrow.
It's not all sunshine and roses, though.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we've already seen how AI can be used for things like surveillance and censorship.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole debate about autonomous weapons. That's
Yeah.
a bit scary, to be honest.
Those are legitimate concerns, and it's crucial that we develop ethical guidelines, international norms, and safeguards
Right.
to ensure that AI is used responsibly and for the benefit of humanity. We need to be having these conversations now before it's too late.
Yeah, it's almost like we're at a crossroads.
Yeah,
AI has the potential to solve some of the world's biggest problems,
it does.
but it could also create new ones.
Right.
It all comes down to the choices we make as individuals, as societies, as a global community.
Well said. And those choices are becoming increasingly complex and consequential as AI continues to advance.
So what's the answer then? Are we destined for a world where AI is controlled by a few powerful countries and corporations? Or can we create a different future where AI is used to empower people and create a more just and equitable world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's not one with an easy answer. It's going to require collaboration, transparency,
Yeah.
and a willingness to challenge assumptions. We need to think critically about the values we embed in our AI systems and the potential long-term consequences
Right.
of the choices we make today.
Feels like we covered a lot of ground today.
We did.
We went from iPhone factories to the future of AI, touched on global power dynamics, the crazy complexities of supply chains, and even the ethical dilemmas of these emerging technologies.
It's been a whirlwind, hasn't it? But I hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of how interconnected our world really is.
Yeah.
How the choices made by governments, corporations, and individuals all have ripple effects that extend far beyond just us.
I know, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we can't just be passive consumers of technology.
Yeah.
We need to be active participants in shaping its future.
Absolutely. The future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create. And by engaging in these conversations, by being informed and thoughtful, we can collectively steer technology towards a path that benefits all of humanity.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
We explored some really complex and challenging issues, but hopefully you've come away from this conversation with a greater sense of awareness, a deeper understanding, and maybe even a little spark of inspiration.
I hope so.
To learn more, ask questions, and engage with the forces shaping our world.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep pushing for a future where technology empowers us all.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.